I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order. First of all, we'll determine a quorum with a roll call. Councilor Baumgartner. Evers is currently absent. Ferguson.
Here.
I am here, and Patterness.
Here.
We do have a quorum. We'll call the meeting to order, and we'll begin the meeting with the public forum portion of the meeting. If anybody from the public wishes to approach council, now is the time to do it. When addressing the council, we ask that you provide your name for the meeting record. Speaking time will be limited to 3 minutes, but we will be happy to facilitate further conversation offline with the appropriate prospective staff member. Anyway, anybody here from the public wish to address council at this time? Seeing none, we'll close down the public forum portion of the meeting and open up the setting of the agenda. I understand it's been expressed that Councilor Baumgartner wants to pull item F from the consent agenda. And so we can make that discussion item D. So with that change, are there any other adjustments anybody's looking for? If not, I'll call for a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So, second.
Motion's made by Baumgartner, seconded by Patterness to approve the amended agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We'll move down into the consent agenda here, which includes the meeting minutes from June 7. The accepting of a donation from Hometown Bake and Health Partners, staff movements for Marcus Jake, Scott Forsman, Colby Schroeder, the authorizing the electronic storage of government records, electronic transactions and electronic signatures, authorizing title and summary publication of ordinance 2024-6 and 2024-7, amending chapter 116 of Olivia City Code regarding liquor licenses, amending chapter 116 of City Code regarding municipal liquor stores, the first reading of ordinance 8, amending chapter 92 of the Olivia City Code regarding accessible current services, an updated personnel policy, and June disbursements. So I'll call for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Ferguson, seconded by Patterness to approve the consent agenda as amended. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Consent agenda carries as amended, and we'll move right into discussion items. With us from the Coalition of the Greater Minnesota Cities is Darren Lee to give us an update on our legislative happenings.
Legislative session, yeah. You maybe you've got them pulled up there already. Perfect. Okay.
We've been having some issues with our HDMI.
Oh, okay. Great. Got some handouts here too. So I'm Darren Lee with the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. Thanks for having me. I think I was here last year. So we just like to go around and give an update in the summertime to our member cities, just to let them know what we've been working on during the legislative session, what we're doing, what's coming up, a little review. So what I've got, or what I've passed out there, what you've got in front of you is our session report from the legislative session, and in the back, you got your staff contacts. I'm on there. Transportation is sort of the issue that I lobby up on the up at the Capitol for, and then our different issue areas there. And then you've also got our legislative outcomes in there, handout on EMS, which is something I'm going to talk about, but this goes into a lot more detail about what's in the legislation that passed this year. And then you've got your save the date for some of our upcoming events, and then our summer conference, still have time to get registered for July 24th coming up in Waite Park in St. Joseph. So there'll be a lot of panel discussions there, some presentations. We'll have a election preview for the fall. So that should be good. So we'd love to have you come to that. So that's what you've got there. So we can go, okay, so thank you. We've got a map here showing all of our different members, and those are actually dots in the correct place this time on this slide. We updated it, and so as a reminder, we're over 100 cities in greater Minnesota, so outside the metropolitan area, the 7-county metro area, which is what makes us unique from the League of Minnesota Cities, is that we just focus on advocating for greater Minnesota local governments. And those are some of the issues that we work on. We have a labor and employment department that is a little bit separate from the lobbying department, but we lobby for those other issues. Notably, local government aid is a big one. And then, as I said, transportation is one that I work on, and then economic development and energy and environment stuff, wastewater issues, which of course is important for all of our local governments. So we can go to the next slide. So this is kind of what we saw going into the legislative session. So you might recall last year, 2023, the legislature passed quite a few different agenda items. So one of the things that we thought we'd see this year was some sort of fixing, adjusting of some things that were passed, notably the cannabis bill, which needed a little bit of updating. The SRO issue, which was became a big controversial topic. That was something that they had to do right at the beginning of the session. Tax bill fix, and then, of course, the Uber and Lyft issue, threatening to leave the Twin Cities metro area. That sort of came to a head in the middle of session. It had been kind of an issue left over from last year, but it really became more of an issue after the Minneapolis City Council voted on some labor requirements. And so that kind of took up a lot of the legislative time. So, the other priorities it was kind of a short list. So it was a traditional bonding year. However, they did pass a bonding bill last year. But typically it's a budget year in the odd numbered years, and then in the even numbered years is when they do a bonding bill. So that was something that the leadership wanted to get done. And then there was a question of what constitutional amendments maybe would be on the agenda. The Equal Rights Amendment was one that got some discussion towards the end of session, which I'll talk a little bit about what sort of the issue was with bonding and why that didn't get done, because there was some other priorities going on. And so I'll get to that a little bit later too. And then we had a new Senate Majority Leader, Senator Dietzick, is having health issues. And so Erin Murphy stepped into that role. And so seeing how she performed in that role was something that we were kind of keeping an eye on. So we can go to our next slide here. And so this shows the budget forecast that came out in February. They had a between 17 and $18 billion surplus last year in 2023. Much of that was accounted for in what the spending that they decided to do. And so here you see on the chart here what they had for 24-25, and then the next biennium 26-27. So certainly not as much money to go around as there was last year. And then they're also accounting for inflation now in the budget forecasting. So you can see there in the middle where that's accounted for. And so that's the structural imbalance. And then you had 2.2 billion for next year. So, or the next biennium. So we can go to the next slide here. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cause of the $17 billion budget surplus they had in 23, was that largely COVID money from the federal government?
Well, there was some COVID money, but I think it was largely just because of revenue collections. But we had a strong economy, and so and then so that's generally what it is just when the economy is strong, there's more tax collections.
Okay.
So our agenda, and yeah, feel free to interrupt with if any questions. I'll do questions at the end, but if you want to jump in, go ahead. Bonding bill is, of course, one of our top three priorities. EMS, $120 million is what we were requesting for that. And you'll see where that number comes from here in a minute. And then all those items that are things that we strongly advocate for up at the legislature is, all contained within a bonding bill. PFA funds, of course, which is so important for wastewater and drinking water projects. And then lead line inventory and replacement is something that we worked on last year. And we got some funding for that, but to replace all lead service lines in the state, of course, is going to be a multi-year process, and there's going to be additional phases of money needed for that. And so the goal is to eventually replace all lead service lines in the state. So that's another part of the request that we were making in the bonding bill. And then we said, we were telling the legislature, let's just tap the brakes on some of the new policy, work on implementing what was done last year, and making sure that that works and doing some of the fixes. And let's pump the brakes on some new ideas. But of course, they listened to us on some of those things, some things they did not. So we'll go to the next slide. So talk a little bit more about EMS. Why did we get involved with this? As a member-driven organization, we were hearing a lot from our member cities who hold PSA licenses just about, the deficit that is occurring. And you'll see on the next slide here, sort of an illustration of the problem. There's no numbers on this graph, but this is sort of more of a representation than an actual number. But you can see insurance reimbursements are just not keeping up with the cost. And so that's the gap is growing. And insurance reimbursements includes private insurance as well as Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements from the federal government. And so that's kind of where that number comes from that we're asking for. You'll see on the next slide here. So this is the gap that currently exists. And you can see local governments in the pie chart there make up 53% of ownership of ambulance licenses. And then the total costs versus revenues including operational expenses, and then the volunteer labor subsidy and capital expenses. And so that's the net reported deficit statewide was 122 million. And so we thought that was a good place to start for a request from the state. And so
I guess I didn't realize how rare our structure in town is.
Mhm.
The
oh yeah
8% private non-for-profit
Yep.
ambulance service.
Yep, there's a few that are done, and then that little tiny sliver there is also tribal ownership of is another pretty small number. But so our solutions were kind of this. We thought, okay, so phase one is let's stop bleeding and get some immediate aid out to these ambulance services just in the near term, just so that we're not losing our greater Minnesota services. And then our phase two is work on sort of a sustainable sort of revenue generation idea, which is something that we're going to work on going into the next legislative session. And then long term is we need to figure out what is the long-term solution to figure out what to do to get these reimbursements from the federal government. So that's something that's going to require working with our federal partners on. And so that's the long-term goal.
You guys done any brainstorming on these sustainable funding mechanisms?
Well, there one possible idea that I've heard floating around, and I don't think we've necessarily endorsed one particular approach, but like to create like a taxing district where you could have that added as a line item on your property taxes, maybe. I've heard that thrown out there, but you know, it remains to be seen. And so that's something that we're gonna continue to work with. I should back up a little bit on our sort of the process that we did for this is we sort of created within the CGMC, we had created a task force, and then the legislature also had their own legislative task force. And so they went around the state, and everything that they heard was recruitment, retention, and reimbursement. Those are the three big things. So it's a workforce issue and then also a reimbursement issue. And so the legislature was hearing the same thing, and the CGMC was hearing the same thing internally from our own members who have experience with this. And so that's kind of where we came up with our phased approach. So, and then here's our bill that we introduced, was sponsored by Representative Liz Lagarde and Senator Hofschild. And so there you can see there's our lobbyist Eric Simonson testifying, and that's the mayor of Hibbing up there testifying on our bill as well. And so we got hearings. We kind of got the ball rolling on it. We got some traction, and one of the challenges we ran into that was really kind of a bummer is that the governor only had 10 million in his budget request. So, and he was kind of targeting that to just only certain areas of the state. And so that makes it tough when the governor's only at 10 million and we're at 120 million to really get that number, get the leadership to really come up from that number. And then the Republican strategy was maybe use some of the leverage that they have on a bonding bill to maybe include some EMS funding. I think they kind of misplayed their hand a little bit in terms of the leverage that they thought they had, which we'll see, I think, here on the next one of these next slides. But so anyway, the outcome was for 24 million, which is 24 million more than we had at the beginning of session. So we did get, a significant increase above the governor's 10 million. But what we really did is put the issue sort of in the in the headlines. And so it's getting a lot more attention than it got even just a year ago. So I think we're going to continue to be involved for sure. And we're going to go back to the legislature and we're going to continue to ask for that additional funding and then also work on longer term solutions. So it was a step in the right direction. Bonding. So like I said, this is a traditional bonding year, being an even numbered years. And then you can see there we had what the debt capacity was. It actually went up in the February forecast. Now, the governor's bonding proposal was kind of a modest proposal, I think, mainly targeted at asset preservation. So, state buildings, state parks, that kind of thing. A lot of that is the MnSCU system, the U of M system. That's a big part of that as well. And there was not a lot in there for local projects. I think you only had 40 million in there for local projects. And so we testified on some of those proposals, just saying that, our priorities were not adequately addressed. Greater Minnesota priorities were not adequately addressed in that bonding bill. And then on this next slide here, you'll see this is kind of all the stuff that we were asking for. And you can see that this is all the stuff that we work on that's all goes into the bonding bill. And you can see the big X, of course, is because the bonding bill ultimately failed. But some of this stuff, some of those numbers were actually a lot. Oh yeah, so you can see at the top there, the combination 300 million for all those public facility authority programs. But I think some of the bonding bills that were released by the House and Senate just had very little, not close to those numbers. And then lead line replacement, you can see, and then BDPI, which is public infrastructure for business development. That is sort of a program that we kind of champion, that also didn't make it in. So the policy stuff that we had was just increasing the caps for those PFA programs. They have not been increased in years. And so, 7 and 5 doesn't get you nearly as much anymore as it did years ago. So those caps need to be increased. And I think the governor is in favor of that. And so that's something that I think policy wise we can get done. Is just, unfortunately, a couple of legislators that are in certain positions on certain committees are providing some resistance on that, but I think we're going to be able to get that upcoming. So why did the bonding bill fail? So I mentioned earlier, focus on other priorities like the Equal Rights Amendment. Even in the final days of session, there was significant time spent on talking about gun control, Equal Rights Amendment, and then Uber and Lyft. I think like the final Saturday of session, the Senate didn't meet for 10, 12 hours that final Saturday because they were negotiating a solution to that. And so and another thing is they did a big bill last year. The Republicans thought they had leverage that they didn't have. And then you may have heard one of the senators from Woodbury was arrested for burglary, which really just threw a wrench into the legislative session and caused a lot of bitterness in the Senate. And so that wasted a lot of time on the floor with a lot of procedural shenanigans that were going on related to that. And so those are some of the reasons why bonding didn't get done. There's also quirks in the calendar with Easter and Passover being, not together this year. So they had a bunch of weeks where they only worked half a week in April. So that's kind of the reasons. And then also just other priorities that the majority had. And so that's kind of.
Yes, listen to the Uber and Lyft thing.
They did. They came to a negotiated agreement with Uber and Lyft where it was, the governor had commissioned, they did a study where it's like, it's not quite as high as what Minneapolis had set it at, but it was low enough that the rideshare companies could live with it. And so now it's a statewide. And so now you won't have other cities trying to set their own rates for drivers. So housing, this is another thing that we worked on quite a bit that we weren't planning on working on. We had to play defense on some of this stuff. There's our executive director, Bradley Peterson, testifying on some of these bills. The missing middle bill, as it was known, a zoning preemption bill, basically trying to increase density. You had a lot of interesting coalition of groups together on this. Like you had environmental groups, you had transit advocates, climate change, of course, was the goal is to address that through greater density. But as zoning is not a problem here, or for our members want economic development, they want housing, they know that, for
Control our zoning.
exactly. And zoning is not the issue, but the original bills would have, compelled up to 8 plexes in single family zoned areas. And then there's also like, some provisions in there that would have allowed mixed use commercial. You would have had to allow housing in commercial districts. And then there's parking minimums, aesthetic requirements. So you wouldn't be able to require certain types of building materials. And then also, some of the other problem with that is there the infrastructure? One of the big issues is there infrastructure that has the capacity to deal with all that increased density? And cities are planning their infrastructure based on the density that they need. And so there were a lot of issues with it. And so we testified and lobbied hard against that. And then we can go to the next slide here. So it was really local governments that killed this legislation. However, the legislative leaders from the housing committees have said that they're going to work on something for next year. So we're going to have to keep an eye out for this. It's going to come back again. And I don't know, I don't think that, I'm not sure how far those discussions have progressed, but the leaders pledged to work with local groups like our group, and then the League of Minnesota Cities as well, to try to come up with a solution that works for everybody. I think they realize that they can't just put something out there before talking to local governments, and that they've got to talk to stakeholders first and come up with something that works for everybody before they just try to introduce the bill. And then all of a sudden we show up and say, well, we weren't involved. We weren't part of the process. And so it's going to be revived again. And so we will have to keep an eye on that next year. Yeah, and you can see it was a really weird coalition. You know, you had advocates, housing advocates, developers, all together with environmental groups and transit advocates. And so a lot of people are like, well, how did this fail when you had such a broad, diverse group that was all for it? And it was really local, because of local governments, that why it didn't pass. And it was suburban Democrats really that just couldn't vote for it. So it died in committee when it was tabled. So we can go to next slide. So I just got a couple other things here real briefly. Local sales taxes, we worked on that issue as well. There's a moratorium through 2025. We would prefer that local governments be allowed to implement local sales taxes without having to go to the legislature for approval. They did come up with a list of certain things where they were hoping to do that. That didn't make it into the tax bill at the end because they couldn't make an agreement. And then prevailing wage for TIF projects, TIF districts, which of course would make some of those housing projects more expensive as well. And then small city streets, I worked on these next two small city streets and greenhouse gas legislation. So we did get 11.35 million in transitional funding for cities under 5,000 that will be coming out in July 20th, actually, here a few days from now. While that auto parts sales tax ramps up over the next 10 years. And so that'll give you some money up front that you'll be able to use for city street repairs while that other funding sort of kicks in as it's phased in. And then greenhouse gas emissions. Last year, there was a legislation proposed that was passed that basically said if you want to do a highway expansion project, you've got to mitigate for greenhouse gases that are going to be increased as a result of that project, and do another project to reduce greenhouse gases elsewhere. And so there was some language that passed this year that allows a little more flexibility to look at projects as a group of projects rather than just a one-for-one project basis. So I think that's going to allow more of those highway projects to go forward. So we think that's positive. And then a bonding bill replacement fund, that's a bill language proposed by some urban legislators saying that, you're going to have to basically have a replacement fund for any assets that you go to the state and ask for money for. Now, if you already had the money for a replacement fund, you wouldn't need to go to the state, obviously. And so that is something that we worked on to try to modify a little bit, but that may resurface again next year. So those are some of the other things that we worked on. And I think my next slide here is just looking ahead.
Question on the auto part sales tax with that 11.35. What's the projected annual revenue supposed to be on that?
So, okay, I've got numbers here.
Sorry, Lyndon.
That's all right.
Birthday, but
So I can tell you
What was our cut on that? Was it only like $8,000 or something this year?
Let's see.
If you look right there. that Spreadsheet.
Yeah, so, okay, so $8,279 is what's in that transportation advancement account that was created last year. And then the one-time payment on July 20th, you'll get $37,105. And then next year, so this is projected for 2025. $60,000 in 2025. So, and then that'll continue to go up.
Okay,
Yep. And so then that gets paid out with your local government aid. So July and December payments, it's split between those two.
so that's only for cities under 5,000, is that right?
Correct. So they few years ago, they started to dedicate some of the sales tax from the sale of auto parts for roads and bridges. And then last year they sort of accelerated the phase in of that. It had been a smaller just a certain percentage of it was dedicated to roads and bridges, and they increased that because I guess the thought is that, purchases of auto parts, it's auto related, sort of like how, sales tax on motor vehicles when you buy a car, that goes to roads and bridges as well. So they thought, well, it makes sense. I mean, this legislature is always looking for new sources of revenue for roads and bridges, just because there's always kind of the needs far exceed the revenues that they collect. And with they're not collecting as much revenue off of the gas tax as they used to, because cars are more efficient and all that sort of thing. So it was just a sort of a creative way to come up with additional revenue. Another one was the delivery fee, which also goes into that account. Deliveries on it had originally been on any deliveries, like a 50-cent fee, but now they watered that down, so it's just deliveries over $100. So
Also, you take a look at these transportation bills and they are pretty metro centric, I think. And so this is another way for us to get a piece of that.
Yep, on the small cities assistance. And there didn't used to be any dedicated revenue for the small cities assistance. It was just whenever they passed a bonding bill, they would put some money in there. So now this is
Tax auto parts, or was it just a diversion of old tax?
a diversion of old tax. So it's, you still pay whatever your regular statewide sales tax is. It's just that instead of that 6.875% going into the general fund, part of it goes into this transportation advancement account. So
Pretty sure electric vehicles don't use a lot of gas anymore.
Or parts.
right. Right.
It's Teslas, right? I mean, have you had to change a windshield wiper on that thing?
How do we tax the Teslas is my question.
That would be the wheelers
$75
tax.
a year.
How do we get?
There is a fee on for tabs on electric vehicles.
$75.
Yeah, so you do pay a little bit more on the electric vehicles there's an additional fee, but it's not nearly as much as, the revenue that's lost from the lack of.
Their weight and
No,
the.
that's
Oh.
correct.
You have the Tesla.
Oh, okay, okay.
Calculated, if you drive more than 20,000 a year, then it's a deal. If you drive less than 20,000 a year, then $75 it's taking too much.
So you road trip your car.
Now I'm not gonna drive very much at all.
I know.
I get screwed.
Well, so you pay the 75 every year
Every
in
year.
addition to
Yeah.
the tabs that you would normally pay for a gas powered vehicle. Okay, yep. So,
Cars are so heavy, so
yeah.
anyway.
There's a lot of ideas out there. There's a lot of ideas out there, like, Senator Howe has a proposal to tax when you charge at a public like when you charge somewhere publicly, like you could put a charger in a state park. And if you go up there charge, you'll pay like a surcharge to use that charging station because, they're just not collecting the revenue that
If
they.
I can plant an idea.
Yeah.
Do it by the kilowatt hour.
Yeah, well, that's what it would be. Like an additional however many cents per kilowatt hour that you charge up would go to, so it's like a charging tax similar to what you pay for whatever, however much you pay per gallon of gasoline.
If it's equitable, it'd be fine. And you could even do it like, you could dial right into the Tesla if you were Tesla and get all that data.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Well, and it's challenging too, because then like, part of it is you'd need to put like a meter on, you'd have to like, Xcel Energy would have to put a meter on these, like a separate meter at the charging station to measure, how much that's being used. And then, so there's some challenges there, but
But the cars already have that, is what I'm saying. The software's already there. It
Oh.
measures everything.
to get it
Yeah.
off the vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Talk to the manufacturers and you probably can just get that beamed right over.
That's a possible idea too. Yeah.
Big brother. All right.
So anyway, what do I have anything else? I think I had some upcoming
No.
events. Okay, so as you know, there's a presidential election coming up. We've got a Senate seat and then the legislature is going to reconvene in 2025. And it's going to be a very different legislature, regardless of how the outcome of the election, just because of how many retirements there have been. So the Republicans are hoping to take back the state house. We'll see what happens. There's going to be a special election for the Senate because Senator Morrison is running for Congress. So that'll leave her seat open. So we'll see what happens there. And then I think I have some upcoming events on this next slide here. Our summer conference, fall conference, legislative action day, come up to the Capitol next year and help us lobby for all these fun things. And then if you have questions on events, you can contact Emma Nelson at our office, who's I think also on our staff contact sheet that you have. And so that's everything I've got. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
We appreciate you advocating for us. We ask that you continue to do so, pay some special attention to some unfunded mandates, that we're being subject to here. We have a conversation coming up about it actually on the agenda here. So,
Okay.
dealing with,
Chloride levels in the
Yeah.
wastewater.
right.
Oh, yep. Yep. That's a big issue. And that's, I was talking to Elizabeth earlier. Sounds like you're on the PFA list for some PSIG money. That's a big one that, we'll be advocating for again next year for sure. Cause that's when the state puts those, mandates on you and you have your treatment facilities are not, not set up for that. All of a sudden it's obsolete. What do you do? And these wastewater treatment is so expensive. So small cities just you can't tax enough to pay for that. So.
Thank you for your advocacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Can I ask Darren a quick question?
Yeah, Pam.
Hey, I tried to find it, but I hear they extended the date for, who is a lobbyist under that bill that was passed last year? Cause there was a question about city attorneys and whether we had to register as lobbyists since we work with councils.
At our office, Elizabeth Wafel, who's on this list.
I have her email.
Yeah.
Okay,
Elizabeth Wafel has been following that for us really closely and you can talk to her about that and she'll be able to answer all that.
okay, perfect. I had just started to look for it and I couldn't find it. I thought maybe you knew off the top of your head.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that there's been a lot of questions and there's been a lot of confusion on some of the new requirements. So we're trying to figure it out ourselves too. So.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yeah, talk to Elizabeth on that.
Not me.
Thank you, Darren. Okay, now we'll have a conversation about park board recommendations. Well, thank you for visiting. Yeah,
Aaron. So the Park and Recreation Board met on July 2nd. And they were discussing different priorities that they had wanted to see. A previous thing that had been on their priority list was actually a dog park, but it was mentioned that instead of looking at quotes for a fence for a dog park, that they've been noticing a lot of people using our pickleball courts at Sunrise Park. They seem to be getting a lot of use from members throughout the community of various ages. And they thought that they would improve the pickleball playing experience by recommending the addition of a fence. They have money in their budget to move forward if that's the direction that council would like to go. They discussed whether it should be 6 feet high all the way around, 6 feet on just the ends, 3 feet on the middle, but they decided it was just easier for use to do 6-foot fence all around the entire pickleball court. And they received quotes, and the one that was the lowest quote was from Century at $12,915 for 240 linear feet of 6-foot high galvanized chain link fence.
Is anything else getting dropped off their agenda to put in the fence, or is this
The dog park.
the dog?
The dog park, so they have every park board meeting at the very bottom of their agenda, they has kind of their project idea list that they have priorities for. And so again, we had started going in the direction of a dog park, but then decided to drop that off the list to move forward with this. They also want to start saving money every year from their budget to move towards an eventual phase 3 part of the trail to be able to have a substantial contribution whenever the city decides to move forward with that project.
Yeah, I respect the wishes of the park board. If that's what their litmus test of the community is showing, that that's the best way to.
Are they going to have the fence directly against the concrete pad, or are they gonna give a little space?
I would have to look. I don't know exactly if it's directly against concrete or if there is space. I will say, just as a shout out to our great citizens, Ron Bailey has been doing an excellent job with the grass and helping seed and water and maintain that new grass around the pickleball court. So again, I think that kind of speaks to the community involvement and support around this court. And that's the kind of direction that park went.
Yeah, the reason I ask is actually Owen and I were playing the other week,
Oh, okay.
and I'm trying to remember, because I ran off the pad several times to get that ball, right?
Yes.
Now with a fence in the way, how is that gonna affect gameplay?
Okay, fair. We will make sure. Somebody who has only played pickleball in college, so it's been a few years
That was my first time.
trying it out. I can't speak to exactly where it will go, but we definitely hope it doesn't hinder. It won't hinder gameplay.
Yeah, I'm sure there's rules, pickleball, where
Yeah.
the fences go, other people have fences.
Yeah, and the fence will also help. We've had a couple of instances of like golf carts getting too close, if not on the court that we want to protect it for. So this will help also protect the investment into this asset for our community. We're making sure we're going with a strong grade fence so that the maintenance and upkeep should be pretty minimal.
Call for a motion to approve the Century bid.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Baumgartner, seconded by Paternoss to approve the Century bid for fencing around the pickleball courts. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, of course. Another thing to bring to your attention that we're still working on figuring out a solution, but as you can understand, there's been a lot of rain recently. And this has brought forward that there are a number of leaks at the library through the roof. So we have had West Central Roofing come out to take a look at the Olivia City Library roof. I understand that they also looked at this last year. And an update was provided with you with kind of no necessarily just an update, not a lot of action being taken. It sounds like we need to take action fairly soon on the roof of the library. West Central Roofing has identified a couple of areas that they recommend should be re-roofed. But essentially, the majority of the roof on the library is at the end of its lifespan. We're getting a second opinion, of course, like we're not just taking the first opinion we get. Very reputable opinion. I'm not saying anything about that, but we are getting a second opinion. We have an inquiry into our insurance company as well to see what, if anything, is covered by insurance. But I just wanted to bring this to your all attention, letting you know that sooner rather than later, we will be bringing a course of action to this council with staff recommendation on how to proceed. I can tell you in my 10 previous years at library experience, water and books don't work well together. It's a big no-no. We also have, two different, we have a primary election coming up in August in this building. We have, of course, a big election coming up in this building in November, and you all will be sitting in this community room at least twice a month, starting this fall as well, while the city hall goes through the project. So not just that we will also be using this space, it's just we're gonna need to deal with the issue.
Well, you can't not do maintenance. Things just get worse.
Correct. And it sounds like they've just been getting worse, unfortunately.
Yeah. We entertaining to learn what the solutions may be.
Yeah, they have a couple, West Central has given me a couple of different options, and I'm kind of waiting to see what some other options might be before bringing the full slate of options to you all. So that's the library update.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. We do have discussion item D, which is seen on the consent agenda as printed. Was moved down there by motion. It's resolution
I'm pulling it up.
78.
Yep.
Application to Public Facilities Authority Clean Water Revolving Fund.
I just wanted to ask questions about this. So the 5.2 was for the whole RO project, which is in line with what I remember. And then, but I wanted to understand if we apply for this loan or
We apply, so this is a resolution that we need to do to continue to be on these PFA project priority lists, which we are currently on. We want to stay on those lists. What that means is if we tomorrow wanted to take on this RO project by ourselves without going for any grant, we could get a loan from PFA for the full amount to do this project. That's not the way we want to go. We're looking for a PSIG, point source implementation grant. That grant period is opening right now. And if we are a recipient of that grant, that can cover up to 80% of the project, which would mean the city's cost is closer to $1 million. However, we want to stay on this list so that because it is a requirement of our permit when it expires that we have to do this to keep up our permit for wastewater distribution. So we want to stay on this list in case we need it. And this list for doing this, passing this resolution, staying on these lists helps put us in a better position to get that point source implementation grant.
it's still just a placeholder.
It's still just a placeholder. We are not executing this loan. We are not asking them for this loan. This is so that we remain on the list and that it's an option should we, we're going to keep trying every single year until we can no longer try, or hopefully we get the money. But you want to stay on this list. And so that's why in talking with Kathy Barrett, who's our PFA contact, this was the resolution she recommended. The reason she recommended this one is because it also talks about how we can have our reimburse expenses that were incurred prior to this. So our engineering costs and things like that can also be reimbursed here.
Good, thank you. That was my question.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry for any confusion.
All right, I'll call for a motion to approve resolution 78, the application to the Public Facilities Authority Clean Water Revolving Fund.
Second.
Motion's made by Ferguson, seconded by Baumgartner to approve resolution 78. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Resolution 78 carries. Thank you. So now we're gonna move down to some committee reports here. West Central Sanitation Contract.
So this is just a report. So this contract has been officially signed. I wanted to include it in the packet so everybody could review for your knowledge. They were very quick back and forth. Pam turned it around really fast as well, which was really appreciated. And in fact, both Dawn and Taylor stopped in earlier today, just for a drop by to say hi, check how things were going. And you know, they wanted to express their appreciation to you all for continuing the contract with them. And they're excited to be part of our Corn Capital Days parade this year.
Thank you. Speaking of Corn Capital Days, it sounds like there was a meeting today. I got my
A very impromptu meeting.
invitation a little late in the day, but
Yes, we had a brief Corn Capital Days meeting. Everyone's really excited about it. We discussed a couple of volunteer needs. So we are still looking for volunteers to set up and tear down for the corn and bean feed, as well as to serve the actual corn and beans. So I think this is a great opportunity for community leaders such as yourselves to volunteer to help serve corn and beans to your constituents. So if you'd like to sign up, our wonderful City Hall summer intern Owen is collecting names of anybody who'd like to participate. If you have any friends or family who are in town who also want to participate, please let us know.
What, you have a list of like hours and everything?
We have a list of hours and everything. You should have received letters in your mailboxes as well that kind of laid out our needs. But we're looking for servers, particularly from 11 to 1. Sign up for 1 hour, sign up for both hours. It's going to be a fun day at the park, I'm told. So this is my first Corn Capital Days. And then
your hands get numb of the burning corn cobs after a while, so. Oh, you served burning corn cobs last year, didn't you?
I really thought it was required.
I mean, we could make it required if everyone wants to do it.
That's gotta pass by vote though, right?
Oh, yeah. Darn it, I should have put it on the agenda. Make it a requirement. Not requirement, but a strongly urge you all to participate. But yeah, really excited about it. They have 70 right now parade units, which is more than last year. So very excited about the parade, looking for more volunteers to help out with the parade as well. So and pray for cooler weather than you had last year. That's what I
It
have
is
for
gonna
Corn
be
Capital
cooler.
Days. And then my other just council report. Oh no, did you want to talk about convention and tourism?
Yeah, we had a tourism board
Yep.
meeting. We had 2 applications and we approved them both. One was for the Friday night band for the street dance. And then the other one was for the ambulance service. We gave them some money to hopefully get a really cool new addition to Thursday night family nights.
Excited.
Yeah, I guess. Are we supposed to be quiet about the addition?
I don't know because they said they might get it, but they might not, but
Let's wait for them to advertise it.
Okay,
right, yeah, 'cause it's really, really cool. I'd hate to steal it.
yeah, we don't want to do that. Any other notices and communications we should be aware of?
Just that filing for city council is July 30th through August 13th. So anybody who is interested in civic engagement and interested in having an imprint on city matters, you can file starting July 30th.
All right, thank you. Any other business to come before the council today? If not, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Baumgartner and seconded by Patternus to adjourn. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.